Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I used to believe that love meant sacrifice. That if you cared enough, if you tried hard enough, the struggles wouldn't matter. I told myself this every time Lauren spoke to me like I was an inconvenience. Every time she rolled her eyes at my ideas or corrected me in front of others. I swallowed it, thinking that maybe this was just marriage. Maybe all couples went through phases where one person's voice became smaller while the others grew louder. While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. But deep down, I knew better. Lauren had never respected me. Not really. It started small. The way she dismissed my opinions about the house, the way she'd cut me off in conversations with her friends, subtly letting everyone know she was the one steering this marriage. Then came the jokes, the ones that seemed harmless on the surface but carried a sharper edge underneath. "Brian's the best house husband I could ask for," she'd say with a smirk at dinner parties. Between his cooking and his cleaning, I barely have to lift a finger. It always got a chuckle, even for me. At first, I played along, laughing with everyone else, because it was easier than making a scene. But over time, the comments changed. "He tried starting a business once," she told our friends over drinks, shaking her head like it was some cute, naive mistake. But let's be real, he's not exactly built for the corporate world. I had been sitting right next to her when she said it. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every time she had chipped away at me, every moment I had let it happen. I wanted to believe that she didn't mean it, that maybe she was just stressed, overworked, tired. But the truth was, she enjoyed making me feel small. I should have seen it sooner. The breaking point came at a family gathering, one of those big, chaotic events where aunts gossip, cousins wrestle in the backyard, and uncles debate sports like it's life or death. Lauren always played the part of the charming wife at these things, smiling, laughing, making sure everyone knew she was thriving. I was in the kitchen, helping my mother-in-law set the table, when I heard her voice from the living room. "I swear, Brian's so lucky I work as much as I do," she said, her tone light, but carrying enough volume to make sure everyone heard. "If he had to handle real responsibilities, I don't think he'd last a week." Laughter. I froze, gripping the edge of the counter. My mother-in-law gave me a sympathetic glance, but she didn't say anything. No one ever did. I walked into the living room, forcing a smile. "Funny," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I thought managing a house, keeping everything running while you work late nights, and handling things you don't have time for counted as responsibility." Lauren barely spared me a glance. "Of course it does, babe," she said sweetly. "But you know what I mean. Real pressure." Something inside me snapped. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just nodded, smiled, and sat down. But in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her keep doing this. I was done being the man she mocked for fun. And I was going to find out exactly why she had spent the last year making me feel like I was nothing. The car ride home was silent. Lauren didn't even look at me, scrolling through her phone like the night had been completely normal, like she hadn't just humiliated me in front of her entire family. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, replaying the moment over and over again. The laughter, the way she dismissed me so easily, like I wasn't even worth defending, like I wasn't even there. I had spent years making excuses for her, telling myself that she was just stressed, that she didn't mean the things she said. But I wasn't stupid. Lauren didn't talk to other people like that. Not her colleagues, not her clients, not the strangers she charmed at networking events. No, the way she spoke to them was different, warm, engaging, respectful. But with me, I was a joke. I pulled into the driveway and shut off the engine. She didn't move, didn't glance up, just kept typing away on her phone. Finally, I broke the silence. "You know," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I'm starting to think you actually enjoy putting me down." She sighed, still not looking at me. "Not this again, Brian." "Yeah," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt, "this again." She finally looked up, rolling her eyes. "It was just a joke. You take everything so seriously." "Doi?" I asked, turning to face her fully. "Because I think if I stood in front of a room full of people and talked about how you weren't good enough, you wouldn't be laughing." Her expression shifted just for a second, but I caught it, the brief flicker of irritation, The moment where she realized I wasn't just going to drop it like I usually did. But then, just as quickly, she scoffed, shaking her head. Brian, come on. You know I don't mean any of that. I support you. I always have. I let out a short laugh. Really? You support me? I looked at her, tilting my head. Tell me, when's the last time you actually said something good about me? When's the last time you told someone you were proud of me? Because all I ever hear is how lucky I am to have you. She frowned. That's not fair. You know what's not fair? I opened the car door, stepping out. Spending years loving someone who sees you as a punchline. I shut the door before she could respond and walked inside. I expected her to follow, to argue, to try and twist things like she always did. But she didn't. She stayed in the car for a long time before finally coming inside without a word, going straight to bed like nothing had happened. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I had never spoken to her like that before, never stood up for myself like that. And the worst part? She still didn't care. The next morning, she was back to normal, smiling at her phone, talking about her latest event, barely acknowledging me as she got ready for work. I watched her, studying her movements, the way she carefully picked out her jewelry, the way she took extra time curling her hair. Big wedding today? I asked, keeping my voice casual. Yeah, she said, adjusting her bracelet. Super high profile. A lot of important people. I nodded slowly. You gonna be working late again? Probably, she said, not looking up. She'd been working late a lot. At first, I didn't question it. Her job was demanding, and I knew how much effort she put into her events. But lately, something felt off. She never used to come home wearing a different shade of lipstick than she left with. Never used to keep her phone glued to her hand like she was waiting for a message she didn't want me to see. And last night, when I stood up for myself for the first time, she didn't even fight back. Lauren always fought back, unless she had something to hide. I felt something shift inside me, a cold certainty settling in my chest. I wasn't imagining things. Something was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek before heading out the door, just like always. But this time, instead of pretending everything was fine, I watched her drive away, my mind already moving to the next step. I was done playing the fool. I was going to find out the truth. And if Lauren thought she could keep me in the dark forever, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The house was quiet after Lauren left, but my mind wasn't. The unease that had settled in my gut last night hadn't left. If anything, it had grown. The more I thought about her late nights, her dismissiveness, her effortless way of making me feel like I didn't matter, the clearer it became. This wasn't just neglect. This was something intentional. I sat on the couch, staring at the spot where she always left her bag when she got home. I never went through her things. I had never felt the need to. But today, that nagging voice in the back of my head told me it was time to stop ignoring the obvious. I walked to the closet where she kept her old purses, the ones she rarely used anymore. Maybe I was grasping at straws, but something told me I'd find what I needed there, hidden away from where I might accidentally stumble upon it. I reached into one of the bags, feeling around the inner pocket, and froze when my fingers brushed against something small and smooth. I pulled it out slowly, my breath catching as I realized what I was holding. A sleek black box, the kind you'd expect to find an expensive watch or jewelry in. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I flipped it open. Inside, lying on a bed of velvet, was a pair of silver cufflinks. Not just any cufflinks, ones engraved with initials that didn't belong to me. I stared at them, the weight of the discovery sinking into my bones. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't something innocent. Lauren had hid this. I closed the box, gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white. I should have felt angry, but for a moment, all I felt was cold. Numb. I forced myself to think. Cufflinks weren't something a woman bought for herself. They were given as a gift meant for a man. And there was only one reason she'd be sneaking something like this into the house. I needed more. I moved to the nightstand on her side of the bed. Lauren wasn't careless. She didn't leave things lying around. But even the most careful people made mistakes. I pulled open the drawer and shifted through the neatly organized contents. Hand lotion, a notepad, a couple of receipts. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then, tucked beneath an old book, I saw the edge of an envelope. I pulled it out and flipped it over. It was a receipt, for a hotel. The date was recent. Too recent. The kind of date that lined up exactly with one of those late nights she had claimed she was working. I felt my pulse slow, my mind sharpening. It was real. It was happening. Lauren was cheating on me, and now I had proof. I sat back on the bed, gripping the receipt, trying to process the flood of emotions rushing through me. I wanted to be surprised. I wanted to tell myself that this was shocking, that I never could have seen this coming. But deep down, I had known. The signs had been there for months. I had just refused to believe them. The lies, the dismissive attitude, the way she had stopped looking at me like I mattered. It had all been leading to this. I stood up, walking to the window, staring out at nothing in particular. My hands weren't shaking. My breath wasn't ragged. Instead, a strange sense of clarity settled over me. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. That's what she would expect me to do. Fly off the handle, break down, beg for an explanation. She would twist it, make herself the victim, find a way to make me look like the unreasonable one. No, I was going to be patient. I was going to be smart. If Lauren thought she had me fooled, if she thought she was in control, then she had grossly underestimated me. I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture of the hotel receipt, then another of the cufflinks, making sure I had copies of everything. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. She had built a life on lies. Now, I was going to take it apart piece by piece. And when the time was right, when she least expected it, I was going to make sure she lost everything. Lauren came home late again that night. I heard her heels click against the floor as she walked through the door, her usual sigh of exhaustion filling the hallway. I was sitting on the couch, the TV on, but the volume low. She barely glanced at me as she dropped her purse onto the counter, scrolling through her phone. Long day? I asked, keeping my voice casual. She nodded, not looking up. Unreal. The bride was a nightmare. I had to stay late just to make sure everything didn't completely fall apart. I watched her carefully. The lie came so easily, so effortlessly. She didn't hesitate, didn't fumble over her words. She had done this before. Many times. That's tough, I said, sipping my drink. Where was the wedding? She paused, just for a second before answering. Fairmont Plaza. You know, the one with the rooftop view. It wasn't. I knew it wasn't. I had checked the GPS tracker I installed on her car earlier that day. She had been nowhere near Fairmont Plaza. Instead, she had driven to a boutique hotel across town. A place discreet enough for affairs, but luxurious enough to impress whoever she was meeting. Must have been beautiful, I said, watching her closely. She finally looked up, giving me that tight, practiced smile. Yeah, you'd love it. I wanted to laugh. She still thought I was stupid. That night, after she fell asleep, I moved carefully. I took her phone from the nightstand and slipped out of the bedroom. I had considered doing this for weeks, but now I had a reason. Now, I knew what I was looking for. I sat in the dim glow of the kitchen light, unlocking her phone with the passcode I had seen her use 100 times. It didn't take long to find what I needed. There were no obvious messages, no saved names or suspicious texts. But people always left something behind. Lauren had a separate messaging app, one I had never seen her use before. When I opened it, my suspicions were confirmed. Dozens of conversations, deleted messages. But one thread stood out, the one at the very top, a name marked only with a single letter. I tapped it. L. Tonight was amazing. I could still feel you on me. Unknown. You were incredible as always. Counting the days until the next one. L. Me too. You have no idea how much I need this. I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening around the phone. My eyes scanned the previous messages, my stomach twisting with every word. The conversations stretched back for months. It wasn't just one guy. It wasn't even two. There were multiple names, multiple threads of deleted exchanges, but this one was recent. I scrolled down, my heart pounding. L. I wish I could just do this forever. Unknown. Soon, baby. One day, you won't have to go back to him at all. I exhaled slowly, willing myself to stay calm. Lauren wasn't just cheating. She was planning something. I set the phone down, my mind racing. This wasn't a fling, a careless mistake she would regret. This was deliberate. She was building an escape plan, setting up her life so that when she finally left me, she wouldn't be walking away with nothing. That's why she had been breaking me down for months, making me feel smaller, like I wasn't worth fighting for. It wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. She was making sure that when she walked away, she would look like the one who had to leave. I had been nothing but an obstacle to her. And soon, she planned to remove me completely. I stood up, gripping the edge of the counter, forcing myself to breathe. Fine. If she wanted to play this game, I was going to show her that I could play it better. I wasn't going to confront her yet. No, that's what she would expect. She was waiting for me to explode, to give her the perfect excuse to make me look like the unstable husband, the one who drove her into someone else's arms. Instead, I was going to let her dig her own grave. The next morning, I took my time preparing. I installed more tracking software, making sure every step she took left a trail. I placed a small recording device in her car, right beneath the dashboard. I called a lawyer, not to file for divorce, not yet, but to prepare. To make sure that when the time came, I wouldn't just be walking away. I'd be walking away with everything. Lauren thought she had outmaneuvered me. She thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming. Lauren was too comfortable, too confident. She had spent so long lying to my face that she didn't even try to hide it anymore. That was her first mistake. She thought I was weak. She thought I would never question her late nights, her cold demeanor, the way she always seemed just a little too eager to get out of the house. But I had been watching, waiting, and now I had everything I needed. I spent the next few days acting like nothing had changed. I still kissed her goodbye in the mornings, still listened when she rambled on about her high-profile wedding events, still played the part of the doting husband who trusted her completely. Meanwhile, the GPS tracker in her car showed me exactly where she was going. The recording device picked up phone calls, soft laughter, plans being made. It was almost too easy. She was meeting him again tonight. I knew that before she even told me. About another late one, she said casually over breakfast, barely looking up from her coffee. The senator's wedding is coming up, and I need to make sure everything is perfect. I nodded, pretending to be distracted by my phone. Of course. Big event like that, I imagine there's a lot to handle. You have no idea. She sighed dramatically. The stress is unreal. I had to stop myself from laughing. Stress? The only thing stressful about her job right now was probably sneaking around behind my back and making sure she didn't get caught. Too bad for her. She already had. I watched her leave that evening, wearing a dress I had never seen before. Tight, low cut, the kind of thing she never bothered wearing for me anymore. She had put effort into this, spent extra time on her hair, checked herself in the mirror one last time before heading out. She wanted to impress him. I waited a full 10 minutes before grabbing my keys and following. The GPS led me to an upscale restaurant downtown, a place we had never been to together. She had reserved something private, tucked away toward the back. I spotted them through the glass as I walked past, Lauren and her mystery man, leaning in close, laughing, sharing a bottle of wine. I could already see how this was going to play out. They would have dinner, a few drinks, maybe some flirting under the table. Then she'd leave first, take a separate car to whatever hotel they had booked for the night. She thought she was being discreet. She had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead of her. I didn't rush in right away. No, that would be too easy. Instead, I waited outside, watching, letting them settle into their little fantasy world where I didn't exist. I gave them time to get comfortable, time to believe they were in the clear. Then, after the waiter had set down their entrees and walked away, I finally made my move. I strolled inside like I belonged there, weaving through the tables with quiet confidence. The moment I reached their booth, I pulled out the chair across from them and sat down. Lauren's fork clattered onto her plate. She stared at me, eyes wide, face pale. The man sitting next to her, a polished-looking executive type, older, the kind of guy who probably thought of himself as untouchable, looked between us in confusion. Brian, Lauren breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled. Hope I'm not interrupting. Her lover cleared his throat, straightening his tie. Can I help you? Actually, yeah, I said, leaning forward. You can tell me how long you've been sleeping with my wife. The man's face went rigid, his posture stiffening. Lauren let out a nervous laugh, shaking her head. Brian, this isn't what it looks like. I tilted my head. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like what I think it is. She glanced around, suddenly aware that people at the surrounding tables had noticed the tension. I saw the panic in her eyes, the way her mind was scrambling for an excuse, a way out. But there wasn't one. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and set it on the table. With one tap, I played the audio I had recorded from the bug in her car. Lauren's voice, soft and sweet, filled the air. "I can't wait to see you tonight. I wish I didn't have to go home at all." The color drained from her face. Her lover paled, his hand tightening around his wine glass. I sat back, enjoying the silence. "That was from 2 nights ago. But if you want, I've got plenty more." Lauren swallowed hard, her eyes darting around the room again, desperate. "Brian, please, let's not do this here. Why not?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I mean, you didn't seem too worried about privacy when you were whispering that in his ear, did you?" Her hands were shaking now. The man beside her cleared his throat, pushing his plate away. "I should go." I smirked. "Yeah, I'd say that's a good idea." He stood abruptly, tossing a few bills onto the table before all but sprinting toward the exit. Lauren didn't even look at him. Her focus was entirely on me now, her breathing shallow, her hands clenched into fists. "How long?" I asked, my voice calm. She hesitated. "Brian, please, just let me explain how." Long tears welled in her eyes. Fake ones. Ones she thought would make me soften, make me see her as the victim. I shook my head. "Save it." I picked up my phone, slid it back into my pocket, and stood. Lauren reached for me, but I stepped back. "I was going to wait," I said, staring down at her. "I was going to let you dig your own grave first. But you know what? Watching you squirm is way more satisfying." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I smiled coldly. "Enjoy your meal, Lauren." Then, without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving her there alone. She had lied. She had humiliated me. She had spent months treating me like I was nothing. Now it was her turn to know what nothing felt like. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I needed to. My heart should have been racing, my blood boiling with rage. But it wasn't. I felt something colder, something calmer. A quiet finality settled in my chest. Lauren had spent months, maybe years, making a fool out of me, lying straight to my face, thinking she was untouchable. But now, the tables had turned. She had lost control of the narrative, and she knew it. That was what really got to her back at the restaurant. Not guilt, not regret, but the realization that she wasn't the one in charge anymore. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, staring at the house we had built together. The place that once felt like home now felt like nothing more than walls and furniture. A cage I had let myself be trapped in. But not anymore. When I stepped inside, everything looked the same. The same framed photos on the wall, the same scent of her perfume lingering in the air. But I wasn't the same. I couldn't be. I didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour after I left her sitting in that restaurant, Lauren came home. The door swung open, and she stepped inside like a woman preparing for battle. Her hair was slightly out of place, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You embarrassed me," she hissed, slamming her purse down on the counter. "In public, Brian." I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. "Embarrassed you?" I turned to face her fully. "You've been sleeping around, lying to my face, making me feel like garbage for years, but you're the one who's embarrassed?" Her jaw tightened. "I didn't plan for this to happen. Spare me." I cut in. "You planned everything, Lauren. Every excuse, every lie, every time you made me feel small so you wouldn't have to feel guilty. Don't stand there and insult me by pretending this wasn't deliberate." She swallowed hard, her face shifting, softening. I had seen this look before. The careful tilt of her head, the glossy eyes, the tremble in her voice. She was about to play the victim. "Brian," she whispered, stepping closer. "I still love you. I never stopped loving you. I held up a hand." "Don't." She flinched, like she actually expected me to believe she felt anything real. "You were going to leave me," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "Weren't you?" Her lips parted, and for the first time, she hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. I let out a slow breath. That's what this was all about. The affairs, the way you kept cutting me down. You were making sure that when you left, no one would question it. No one would feel sorry for me. Her eyes darted away. She couldn't even look at me. I stepped past her, heading for the hallway. "I want you out." She spun to face me. Brian, I'm done, I said, my voice like stone. Pack your things. Call whoever you need to. I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here. She scoffed, crossing her arms. You can't just throw me out of my own house. I smirked, reaching for the drawer where I had stashed the divorce papers. I had my lawyer draft the moment I found out the truth. I pulled them out and tossed them onto the table between us. Actually, I said, I can. She stared at the papers, blinking rapidly, like her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. You already talked to a lawyer? Of course, I said smoothly. Did you really think I was just going to let you keep playing me? I shook my head. No, Loudon. You lost the second you thought I was too weak to fight back. Her breathing picked up. Her confidence, that smug superiority she always carried, was gone. Now, she was scrambling, trying to find her footing. This isn't fair, she finally choked out. I let out a bitter laugh. Fair? I leaned in just slightly. Was it fair when you told me you were working late while you were with them? Was it fair when you made me feel like I was the failure, the one who wasn't good enough just so you could justify what you were doing? Tears welled up in her eyes, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. She was trying to calculate, to strategize, to find some way out of this. But there wasn't one. I picked up the papers and placed a pen beside them. Sign. She let out a shaky breath. What happens if I don't? I met her gaze, my voice calm. Then I make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. Her face crumbled. She knew what that meant. The senator's wedding, the reputation she had spent years building, it would all come crashing down. She had spent so long making sure I was the one who looked small, the one who looked like a failure. But now, she was the one with everything to lose. She swallowed hard, her hands shaking as she picked up the pen. For a moment, she hesitated, like she wanted to say something, wanted to make one last attempt at salvaging her dignity. But there was nothing left to say. She signed. The weight in my chest finally lifted. I picked up the papers and tucked them away, nodding toward the stairs. Go pack. She lingered, watching me, like she was waiting for me to change my mind. When I didn't, she finally turned and disappeared down the hallway. I stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where she had been. The woman I had once loved, the woman I had built a life with, was nothing more than a stranger to me now. And for the first time in years, I felt free. She thought she could ruin me. She thought she could walk away and leave me in pieces. But in the end, I was the one who walked away, and she was left with nothing. Lauren was gone by the next afternoon. She didn't make a grand scene. No screaming, no crying. Just a quiet, simmering rage beneath the surface as she packed her things, shoving clothes into suitcases with a little too much force, slamming drawers shut, her entire body tense with unspoken anger. She was still trying to process how she had lost control. She thought she had outplayed me, thought she would be the one leaving me in ruins. But now, she was the one being forced out, the one who had to start over with nothing. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching as she zipped up her final bag. Where are you going? She didn't look at me. I'll figure it out. I nodded. That meant she hadn't told her family yet, hadn't spun her story to make herself the victim. She wasn't ready for the embarrassment. The moment she told them what happened, she'd have to admit she lost. Her grip tightened on the suitcase handle, her knuckles white. Are you happy now? I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. No, Lauren. I would have been happy if you had been the person I thought you were. For a second, I thought she might break, that I'd see even a flicker of the woman I had once loved. But she only scoffed, rolling her eyes like none of this mattered. Congratulations, Brian, she muttered. You finally grew a backbone. I smirked. Too bad for you, huh? She shot me a glare before grabbing her purse and shoving past me, dragging her suitcase down the hall. I followed her to the front door, watching as she struggled for a second, then finally yanked it open. She turned back, something sharp in her expression. You'll regret this. I raised an eyebrow. I don't think I will. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and without another word, she stepped outside, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the door, listening to the distant sound of her car starting, then fading down the street. I should have felt relief, freedom, but all I felt was empty. Not because I missed her, Not because I wish things had turned out differently, but because I had wasted so much time. Years of my life devoted to someone who never truly loved me. Someone who saw me as a convenience, a placeholder, a safety net while she entertained herself elsewhere. And I let it happen. I let myself believe I wasn't good enough, that the problem was me. Not anymore. I turned away from the door and walked back inside, feeling the weight of her absence settle over the house. For the first time in years, the space felt like it belonged to me. I spent the next week making changes. I went through every room, getting rid of anything that reminded me of her. The framed wedding photos? Gone. The fancy wine glasses she insisted on keeping even though she barely used them? Packed up and shoved into storage. Even the expensive throw pillow she had bought just to impress guests, gone. It felt good, like I was reclaiming my life piece by piece. The divorce process moved faster than I expected. Lauren didn't fight. She knew she had nothing to stand on. The prenup ensured she wouldn't get a dime from me. And with the proof I had gathered of her affairs, she didn't dare try to argue for anything more. She signed every document without protest, but I could see the resentment in her eyes every time we sat across from each other in the lawyer's office. One afternoon, after signing the final paperwork, she lingered for a moment, staring at me from across the table. "What?" I asked. She sighed, shaking her head. "You really don't feel anything about this? About us?" I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. "I feel relieved." That was the last time we spoke. The settlement was finalized, and Lauren faded from my life like a bad dream. She tried reaching out once, some half-hearted attempt at closure, maybe, but I didn't respond. She didn't deserve closure. She didn't deserve anything from me. Weeks passed, then months. Little by little, I started rebuilding. I reconnected with old friends, people I had distanced myself from when my marriage consumed my life. I started focusing on work again, pushing myself in ways I hadn't in years. And most importantly, I stopped questioning my worth. One day, I got a message from an old coworker. A casual invitation to grab a drink, catch up. For the first time in a long time, I said yes. Sitting at the bar that night, laughing at stories from years ago, I felt something strange, something unfamiliar. Happiness. Not just contentment, not just the absence of pain, but real, genuine happiness. Lauren had spent years convincing me I wasn't enough, that I would never be successful, never be the kind of man she wanted. But here I was, finally realizing that the problem had never been me. It had always been her, and now I was free. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.